What if the number 666 was never meant to be evil at all? What if it carried a secret older than the Bible, hidden across ancient temples, gods, and empires? This isn't just about religion or superstition. It's about a forgotten code buried in plain sight, from Sumerian kings to secret Roman cults. In the final chapter, you'll discover the most shocking truth. 666 wasn't just a number. It was a message encrypted in time itself. Chapter 1: The Sumerian Code. Long before the number 666 was feared, before it was tattooed onto the pages of prophecy and dread, it was just a number, simple, elegant, and powerful. To find its origin, we must turn back time, not by centuries, but by millennia. 6,000 years ago, a world took shape in the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia. This was Sumer, the land between rivers, a place where dust turned into cities and mud bricks into temples. The Sumerians were not ruled by superstition or myth, not yet. They were ruled by order. And in this world, numbers were everything. They didn't count like we do. They didn't use tens or hundreds. They built their world on a sacred rhythm, a rhythm of sixes and sixties. It pulsed through their markets, their skies, and their temples. They called it the sexagesimal system. And at its heart, hidden in plain sight, was a number that would one day become a symbol of fear. 666. The Sumerian number system was not accidental. It was cosmic, rooted in observation, shaped by the stars, and baked into every calculation. Unlike our decimal system based on 10 fingers, the Sumerians built theirs on a more complex and mystical foundation based 60. Why 60? Because it could be divided in more ways than 10 could ever allow. 60 is divisible by 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. This made it perfect for trade, construction, and most importantly, astronomy. They didn't just invent numbers. They invented time. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 12 hours of day, 12 hours of night. These were not just conveniences. They were echoes of a deeper system, one that connected humanity to the cosmos. The number 6 and its multiples like 60, 600, and eventually 666 were not random figures. They were embedded into the structure of reality as the Sumerians saw it. And they believed numbers carried power, a power that could be harnessed or feared. To understand how the Sumerians viewed numbers, you must enter their temples, not with torches or swords, but with your mind open. Because in their sacred spaces, mathematics wasn't science, it was spiritual. Cuneiform tablets recovered from ancient ruins like Uar and Nippur tell stories not in words, but in numbers. Priests weren't just holy men. They were mathematicians, astronomers, and architects of sacred knowledge. They used base 60 numbers to track stars, predict eclipses, and map out agricultural calendars. Rituals were aligned with lunar cycles. Offerings were calculated in precise measurements. The gods themselves were quantified, and the repeating number patterns, especially multiples of 6, began to take on meanings that went beyond logic. In this world, 666 wasn't a mark of the beast. It was a sign of balance, complexity, and sacred totality, a number that, to the trained priest, whispered of cycles, order, and cosmic symmetry. Imagine a clay tablet held in the hands of a temple scribe. He presses a stylus into wet clay, recording debts, sacrifices, and lunar positions. To us, the symbols are alien, wedge-shaped impressions in rows. But to him, it's a code, a language of the gods. He calculates an offering for a feast: 6 jars of oil, 60 measures of grain, 600 bricks for construction. Not random numbers, sacred ones. The pattern of 6, 60, and 600 forms a hidden trinity. Over generations, these numbers become ritualistic. They are repeated, memorized, and eventually mythologized. Now imagine someone notices something strange. That 666, 666, is the sum of these sacred steps combined. It becomes more than a number. It becomes a symbol. But at this time, in this place, it is not evil. It is orderly, it is complete. A divine echo of the system itself. The Sumerians didn't see it as demonic. They saw it as design. As civilization grew, the number 60 became the backbone of everything structured. Their year was divided into 12 months of 30 days, 360 days in total. Add in the sacred 5-day festival of renewal and you get 365. The calendar, the seasons, the constellations, they were all mapped with base 60 logic. And within that structure, 6 and 666 appear more than you'd think. 6 days of labor, a 7th of rest. 60 as the number of Anu, the supreme god of heaven. The number 600 for Enlil, the god of air and kingship. These weren't just deities. They were mathematical archetypes. Their divine rankings were expressed numerically. 6, 60, 600. The line between number and being was blurred. And somewhere, tucked in the corners of these divine ranks, 666 began to shimmer faintly, not as a curse but as a completion, a totality of divine authority spread across heaven, earth, and time itself. But the Sumerians weren't the only ones using base 60. Their system spread like wildfire, passing to the Akkadians, the Babylonians, and beyond. Every empire that inherited their knowledge also inherited their sacred math. And 666 went with it. You see, once a number becomes mythic, it never truly dies. It changes shape, takes on new meanings. As Babylon rose and fused astrology with theology, 666 began to shift. But in Sumer it was still pure. A number of layers, 6 tens of 61, 3 divine steps, 1 unified symbol. There's evidence that some temples even had ritual objects crafted in these multiples. 6 golden goblets, 60 stairs, 600 ceremonial beads. The Sumerians never wrote a prophecy about the beast. They never feared this number. Instead, they respected it. Because for them, numbers weren't just tools, they were portals into deeper knowledge. And 666 was a key, one that would later be misunderstood, twisted, and feared. Now step back. Picture an entire civilization built upon harmony. The sky above mapped by arcs of 60 degrees. The fields below measured by multiples of 6. Days timed, crops planned, taxes calculated, all in this numerical rhythm. Even the walls of the ziggurats, the massive temple towers that reach toward heaven, were designed with ratios echoing their sacred math. Some scholars believe the steps, angles, and heights were crafted not for aesthetics, but for resonance. Numerical resonance. 6s layered upon 60s. Hidden codes written in stone. In this harmony, 666 lurked, not as a warning, but as a whisper, a reminder that order could be divine, that through numbers humans could reflect the heavens. The priests knew it, the kings honored it, and the scribes recorded it. But over time, as new gods came and wars raged, the meanings faded. All that remained were the numbers, and in those numbers the ancient secret lingered. So how did this sacred number begin its long fall from grace? That's the shadow we'll chase in later chapters. But the root was never evil. It was intellectual. The Sumerians were among the first to ask what lies beneath the surface of the world. Not through myth alone, but through structure, pattern, measurement. In their quiet, methodical way, they built a legacy that would outlive their cities. And at the heart of that legacy, nestled deep in the foundation, was the number 666. Not carved in fear, but precision. Not whispered in dread, but in reverence. They didn't see it as a curse. They saw it as truth. A code that told them the world was knowable, that the stars moved in order, and that numbers could lead the way. They didn't fear it. They trusted it. Some modern historians dismiss these patterns as coincidence. But the further we look into ancient systems, the more intentional they appear. Repeating ratios, mirrored sequences, numerical symmetry, it's everywhere. 666 keeps reappearing. Not just in religious texts, but in temple measurements, timekeeping systems, and ceremonial cycles. The Sumerians didn't stumble into it. They designed around it, and they passed it down, encoded in clay, etched in stone, and buried in architecture. While later cultures would rewrite its meaning, the Sumerians built it with clarity. They believed the universe was built from logic and rhythm. In their eyes, 666 was one such rhythm, a harmonic pulse in the fabric of the cosmos. You didn't need to fear it. You just needed to understand it. That was their secret, a secret we buried, a secret we're only beginning to unearth. And so we end where we began, with a number, not a prophecy, not a beast, just a number woven into the earliest foundations of civilization. In the world of the Sumerians, numbers were not neutral. They were alive, symbols of divine law, cosmic cycles, and earthly design. 666 was not a warning. It was an invitation to see beyond chaos and glimpse the architecture of existence. This chapter was never about fear. It was about understanding. But as we move forward into the lands of sun-worshipping priests, star-watching kings, and code-writing prophets, the story will darken, the meaning will twist, and the number will shift its mask. In the next chapter, we cross the desert into the land of the pyramids, where gods ruled the sun, and 666 rose again, not in shadow, but in light. Before we continue to Chapter 2, let me know if you're enjoying this kind of long, gentle history. Feel free to tap that like button and subscribe, only if you truly love what I'm doing here. And in the comments, share where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your city. I always love seeing our little bedtime crew gathering from every corner of the world. Now lower your lights. Maybe let a soft fan hum in the background and settle in. Let's proceed with tonight's quiet journey together. Chapter 2: Egypt's Solar Secrets. The journey continues westward, where the sun rises not just over temples, but over eternity itself. Welcome to ancient Egypt, a civilization carved into stone and sand. Unlike the Sumerians, who gazed at stars to build their calendar, The Egyptians worshipped the sun as a living god. Here, everything revolved around Ra. The sun wasn't a distant light in the sky. It was a divine force steering the rhythm of life and death. And with this worship came numbers. Not just any numbers, but carefully chosen ones. Patterns, codes. Hidden sequences whispered into the chambers of pyramids and spoken in the language of balance. Among these patterns, 666 begins to appear, not as a warning, but as a symbol, a reflection of cosmic order, as if the universe left behind a signature. And those who could read it, the priests, the architects, the mystics, understood it as something sacred. In Egypt, numbers and gods were never separate. They were one. To understand how deeply numbers were woven into Egyptian life, you must first stand before the sun itself. At dawn, light spills across the Nile Valley, illuminating temples aligned with precise astronomical events. These structures weren't randomly placed. They were calibrated, measured, aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and the movements of celestial bodies. The sun's journey across the sky told a story of time, death, and rebirth, and numbers told that story's rhythm. At the heart of this solar religion lay the calendar, a tool of both science and ritual. The Egyptians calculated the year as 365 days, based on the heliacal rising of Sirius. But in their religious cycles, the number 6 and its multiples played a quiet but persistent role. Not always obvious, sometimes hidden. In rituals, in architectural dimensions, in layers of symbolism. And among these layers, the shadow of 666 began to take form, not as a curse, but as a cipher of divine proportion. Let us walk into the Great Pyramid of Giza, where stone whispers secrets to those who listen. This structure wasn't simply a tomb. It was a machine of meaning. The Great Pyramid's base measures approximately 756 feet on each side, and its height, once complete, stood around 481 feet. When analyzed in cubits, the ancient Egyptian unit of measurement, patterns begin to emerge. Ratios that echo solar cycles, geometric harmonies that resonate with planetary orbits. Scholars and mystics alike have noticed something strange. Certain internal proportions approximate values that, when examined through base 10 or gematria-like filters, tease out numbers like 216, 432, and even 666. Coincidence, perhaps, but layer upon layer reveals recurrence. It's as if the pyramid encoded celestial mathematics, an architecture of heaven translated to earth. The ancient builders may not have written down the number 666 explicitly, but the frequency of six-fold divisions in temple layouts, ceremonial steps, and astronomical tables leaves a trail, one that leads straight into solar worship. Every temple told a story, and numbers were its chapters. Egyptian priests believed in Ma'at, the principle of balance and harmony that governed the cosmos. Their rituals revolved around restoring and preserving that cosmic order. To achieve this, they used numbers as sacred tools. One key element was the duodecimal system, dividing the day and night into 12 parts each. 12 hours of light, 12 of darkness, that's 24. A cycle. Multiply that by the sacred 6, and you reach 144. Multiply again, and you reach 864. Then 1,728. Keep going, and eventually, as cycles scale upward, the number 666 finds its way in. It's not magic, it's math. But in Egypt, math was magic. Everything was interconnected. The number 6 governed ratios of musical harmonies, star groupings, even the breath of life itself. The number 666, when it appeared in complex calendrical layers or pyramid dimensions, was a harmonic fingerprint. Not feared, not named, but felt. Revered for its resonance with the sun's eternal pulse. One of the most curious places this appears is in the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead, not as the number itself, but through layered symbol sets. The soul's journey through 12 gates. The sun god Ra's voyage through the underworld, divided into 12 stages of transformation. Combine the ritual time of passage, 6 hours of light crossing into 6 hours of darkness, and you return to the sacred 12. Multiply cycles. Repeat them through solar festivals, agricultural rotations, and calendar reform, and the pattern thickens. 6, 60, 600, eventually 666. Always just out of reach, always part of something greater. A cosmic equation too grand to write plainly. To the priesthood, 666 wasn't a final number. It was an unfolding one. A sum of spiritual stages. A measure of cosmic completion. And in a culture obsessed with eternal life, completion was the highest goal. Death wasn't the end. It was another gate. And the numbers, especially numbers like 666, pointed the way. Even the gods spoke in math. Ra, the sun god, ruled from the solar disk, but his power was divided and refracted through many forms. Adam at dusk, Khepri at dawn. The number of forms, the hymns sung in his name, the steps leading to his temples, they all followed rhythmic rules. Isis and Osiris, Hathor and Thoth, each deity had sacred numerologies encoded in offerings and festivals. Festivals were often aligned with days divisible by 6 or timed to solar zeniths and equinoxes that matched repeating intervals. The high priests, who memorized entire libraries of numerical lore, understood what commoners never could. That 666 was not a demon's number. It was a resonance, a convergence point, a moment when calendar, architecture, and astronomy synchronized perfectly. It wasn't counted on fingers. It was felt in the rhythm of light, a pulse that echoed through time, stone, and sky. And for those with eyes to see, it was a hidden compass pointing to the divine. The more Egypt grew, the more complex its math became. The Egyptians understood fractions long before the Greeks, using unique symbols to represent portions of bread, water, and land. But these fractions weren't cold or mechanical. They were spiritual. The Eye of Horus, for example, was broken into 6 parts, each representing a different sense: sight, hearing, thought, and so on. These fractions summed to 63/64ths, with the missing piece representing mystery, the unknowable. But here again we see 6, and from that 6 entire cosmologies were built. Expand the system, layer it across years and dynasties, and the mathematical momentum builds. 6, 60, 600, then 666. It was not always written, but it was always present, just beneath the surface, like a shadow in the sunlight. The priests knew how to hide it in plain sight, wrapped in ritual, disguised in geometry, whispered in hymns. The number 666 wasn't a threat. It was the key to divine rhythm. But Egypt's brilliance did not last forever. Dynasties rose and fell. Foreign kings sat on the throne of Ra. The pyramids decayed, their gold stripped, their secrets stolen. Yet the numbers remained. Stone doesn't forget, and neither does math. Even when Egypt fell to Persian invaders, then to Alexander's Greeks, the knowledge embedded in its monuments lingered. And with it, so did the unspoken codes. 666 wasn't passed down as a warning. It was passed down as a question. What if numbers could hold memory? What if every sunrise, every solstice, every step of the pharaoh's tomb echoed a hidden logic? Something that only now we begin to understand? As we trace the line of sixes across the sands, we realize something haunting. This number was never about evil. Not yet. It was about time. Sacred time, solar time. And those who could decode it didn't see doom. They saw destiny. Modern archaeologists, historians, and numerologists have debated these patterns. Some say the connections are symbolic, others mathematical. Some dismiss them entirely, but others, those who read more than just history, know that ancient civilizations didn't separate science and myth. Numbers weren't sterile, they were spiritual, and 666. It was both a riddle and a revelation. It wasn't feared in Egypt. It wasn't cursed. It was part of the sun, the repeating cycles, the burning truth. Today, when we call it the number of the beast, we forget that it once pointed to light. Before it was twisted into darkness, it was a number of order, of balance, of gods. And that dual legacy, solar and shadow, sets the stage for what came next. A kingdom obsessed not with the sun, but with the stars. So now we leave Egypt, not with fear, but with wonder. We carry 666 not as a curse, but as a relic of light, of balance, of sacred design. We've seen it in the temple stones, in the ratios of pyramids, in the journeys of Ra through the night sky. We've felt its echo in the heartbeat of the sun. But the story doesn't end in sunlight. It shifts. The next land we enter will not worship Ra. It will chase destiny in the stars. Babylon waits, and there the number will change. It will become a tool of power, of pride, of gods who fall and kings who rise. In Egypt, 666 guided the soul. In Babylon, it will test it. Chapter 3, Babylon and the Beast. Babylon rose from the dust like a dream sculpted in brick and fire. Where Egypt had worshipped the sun, Babylon looked upward at night, drawing power not from heat, but from stars. The priests of Babylon weren't just observers, they were interpreters of destiny. To them, the heavens were a living text, and numbers were the language in which the gods spoke. And as they charted the movement of Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn, a familiar rhythm emerged once again, pattern echoing the number 6. But here, unlike Sumer or Egypt, that pattern began to shift. The number 666 no longer appeared solely as harmony. It started to develop a double edge, a number that symbolized both celestial order and human ambition, a number that could point to the divine, or to a king's hunger for godhood. In Babylon, numbers became mirrors, and in those mirrors the beast began to stir. Not yet named, not yet cursed, but rising all the same. The Babylonians inherited the Sumerian sexagesimal system, and they expanded it. They refined astronomical tables, measured time with uncanny precision, and developed complex calendars still admired today. Their obsession with cycles led them to discover patterns that span centuries. The zodiac was not entertainment to them, it was a mechanism of fate. They tracked each planet's slow crawl across the sky and assigned divine meaning to its passage. And within these calculations, certain numbers appeared again and again. Numbers tied to the lunar calendar, solar years, and planetary conjunctions. Among them were the repeating sixes, 60 degrees of separation between constellations, 6 planetary paths of influence, 600 years to complete a great age. From this cosmic grid, the number 666 emerged, not through superstition, but through alignment. An elegant point where star maps, deity rankings, and kingly claims converged. But Babylon added something new to the number's legacy. Here, it wasn't just a number of balance. It became a number of power. Babylonian kings were more than rulers. They were symbols, divine incarnations. They claimed favor from the gods and walked among their people as if they themselves were celestial. Temples like the massive Etemenanke ziggurat stood as architectural manifestations of that divine authority, mountains made by men. And in their inscriptions and rituals, the number 6 took on new weight. The throne steps, the festival cycles, the calculation of tributes, multiple rituals repeated in patterns of 6, 60, and 600. The king wasn't just ruling over people, he was attempting to rule over time. And at the apex of this control, something shifted. The number 666, a product of their star maps and calendars, began to take on a darker glow. Because in Babylon, to control the heavens was to rival the gods. And in that rivalry, arrogance took root. A pattern of sixes became more than math. It became ambition, it became pride. And pride, in every ancient myth, brings a fall. One ruler stands out from the ruins, Nebuchadnezzar II, a king of unmatched splendor. His walls enclosed the greatest city the world had seen. His hanging gardens, if they existed, were wonders meant to defy nature. His conquests stretched across deserts and rivers, and in his inscriptions, echoes of sacred numbers appear, in recorded tribute amounts, in temple volumes, in lengths and weights, all flowing with sixes and their multiples. Whether by design or accident, the numbers aligned. His own deification ceremonies were steeped in numerical rites, designed to place him among the stars. But in reaching upward, Babylon also began to tilt. The number 666 was no longer just sacred or structural. It became symbolic of something else, something unstable, a desire to claim eternity. And when a mortal man wraps himself in the trappings of gods, the result is not balance. It's distortion. Babylon began to crack beneath the weight of its own divine ambitions, and the number at its center grew heavy with dual meaning. While priests continued mapping constellations, others turned numbers into names. Babylon's scribes were masters of gematria, the practice of assigning numerical values to words. Names became numbers. Titles, cities, even prophecies could be encrypted. It was in this world that the seed was planted. The idea that a number like 666 could represent not just cycles or balance, but an individual, a ruler, a tyrant. Babylonian tablets contain records of planetary omens tied to royal births and deaths. Numbers predicted the fate of empires. When certain numerical alignments returned, so did catastrophe. One such alignment involved a 6-day eclipse cycle and a 66-year star convergence. When repeated 3 times, the number sequence led to 666, an omen, a warning. The line between cosmic order and doom blurred, and so the number changed. It still carried divine math, but now it whispered of collapse, of kings who thought themselves gods, and of the heavens pushing back. In Babylon's sacred rituals, the priest would ascend the ziggurat's spiral ramp, carrying offerings to the stars. Every level of the structure corresponded to a planet, a god, and a numerical value. The ascent wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. A journey from earth to sky, from man to God. And once again, the number 6 defined the structure. 6 visible planets. 6 levels of divine authority. 6 sets of rites before communion with the heavens. Multiply, layer, echo, and the shape of 666 emerges, not explicitly carved, but built into the framework. The climb was always upward, toward perfection, toward divinity, but the higher one climbs, the farther there is to fall. Babylon knew this, and still they reached. The number 666, once a quiet harmony in Sumer and a radiant cycle in Egypt, became a ladder in Babylon, a ladder made of pride, prophecy, and hubris, and like all ladders, it led somewhere dangerous. As Babylon's power grew, so did its enemies. The empire became a target for rebellion, conquest, and ruin. The city fell, was rebuilt, and fell again. But the number remained. Scholars and mystics from later ages returned to Babylonian records and saw it. The sixes, the codes, the patterns. And in them they saw warnings, lessons. The number 666 no longer symbolized just balance or glory. It was a reflection of excess, of mortal men trying to shape eternity. A number born from sacred math but twisted by ambition. When later generations sought to identify tyrants, villains, or false messiahs, they turned to Babylon's legacy of numerology. They used gematria to convert names into numbers, and more than once, 666 appeared. Not by accident, but by design. Babylon had shown that numbers could name kings. And now, kings could be named beasts. Even after Babylon fell, its star maps endured. Its mathematical systems influenced Greece, Rome, and even early Jewish and Christian thought. And with that transmission came the lingering shadow of 666. In prophetic writings, Babylon came to represent more than a city. It became a symbol of all corrupt empires, all rulers who reached too high. The beast, when it was finally named, carried Babylon's DNA. It wasn't just a figure of evil, it was a reflection of what happens when cosmic order is replaced by human pride. When the stars are used not to guide, but to dominate. 666, once a pattern of the heavens, had become a symbol of earthly excess. Babylon was the turning point, the moment when the number split into two meanings, divine structure and dangerous ambition, light and shadow, order and arrogance. The beast wasn't born in Babylon, but the mask it would wear was forged there. And so Babylon gave the world two legacies, one of brilliance, one of warning. It taught humanity to measure time, to map the skies, to encrypt messages in numbers. But it also showed what happens when numbers become tools of control. When kings use the divine to justify their own immortality. 666, shaped by stars and stone, became a mirror. It reflected the best and worst of what civilization could become. And that mirror was carried westward, to the Greeks, to philosophers and mystics, to mathematicians who would add depth to its meaning. In the next chapter, We follow the number into the minds of those who saw numbers not just as symbols, but as living truths. We enter the world of Pythagoras, of sacred geometry, of ratios that echo in music, architecture, and myth. In Babylon, 666 became the beast's shadow. In Greece, it will become the divine's echo. Chapter 4: Greece, Geometry, and Gods. When the torch passed from Babylon to Greece, it didn't just light new temples. It ignited a revolution of thought. The Greeks didn't inherit myths blindly. They dissected them. They questioned the heavens, mapped the stars, and searched for truth not in superstition, but in structure. And yet, beneath this logic, something mystical remained. In their philosophy, math wasn't a tool, it was a key, a sacred thread tying reality to the divine. This was the world of Pythagoras, where numbers breathed and geometry whispered secrets from the gods. Circles, triangles, ratios, everything was alive with hidden meaning. And here, in the precision of form and the harmony of sound, the number 666 reemerged. No longer just a relic of empires past. Now it was a rhythm, a code, a presence woven into architecture, music, and myth. To the Greeks, 666 wasn't cursed. It was complex, a riddle wrapped in logic and legend, a number echoing something eternal. Pythagoras believed numbers ruled everything. The cosmos sang in numerical harmony. Planets moved in tuned intervals, just like strings on a lyre. This harmony, known as the music of the spheres, could not be heard with ears but felt in the soul. And at the center of this philosophy were ratios, precise proportions, sacred divisions. The triangle, especially the 3-4-5 right triangle, was sacred geometry incarnate. Multiply its elements, stack them, echo them through scale, and as the layers grew, so did the patterns. Eventually, in these overlapping harmonics, a certain number began to appear, 666. Not overtly, but when you arranged musical intervals in sixths or examined the ratio of tones in hexachords, the fingerprints were there. 6 was stability, harmony, but when taken to its fullest expression, it formed a triangle of another kind. One with 3 points: man, logic, and divine symmetry. 666 was not feared. It was admired. The Greeks saw beauty in balance, and 666 became part of that balance. Greek temples were more than buildings. They were frozen prayers. The Parthenon, the Temple of Apollo, the oracle sites at Delphi, they were all designed with mathematical precision. Every column, every corner followed rules of ratio and alignment. The golden ratio, phi, governed proportion. And in those ratios, multiple numeric traditions overlapped. Hexads, dodecads, multiples of 6. When scaled, these forms created fractal echoes. Look closely at the layout of some shrines, and you'll find 36 columns, 6 rows of 6. Look at the base and height proportions of altars, and again, multiples of 6 and 60 recur. Not by chance, by design. Architects knew what they were doing. They weren't just building temples for gods. They were building interfaces, machines to interact with the divine. 666 wasn't painted in red or carved in warning. It was measured in stone, implied in angles, whispered in marble. To them, it was symmetry manifest, a reminder that to touch the gods, one must first understand the pattern. Philosophers like Plato took it further. He described a world where numbers weren't just tools, they were forms. Ideals realer than reality. Every object in the physical world, he said, was just a shadow of its perfect mathematical version. This idea, known as the theory of forms, meant numbers weren't invented. They were discovered, eternal truths etched into the bones of the universe. In this worldview, 666 becomes more than a number. It becomes a shadow of perfection, a bridge between the tangible and the divine. In Platonic cosmology, the soul passed through celestial spheres in cycles governed by mathematical proportions. The journey of the soul was measured, not imagined. Ratios dictated rebirth, harmony ensured order. But if the soul strayed, if the pattern broke, imbalance followed. Here, 666 could become a warning, not of evil but of excess, of losing one's alignment with the cosmos. A beautiful number until misused. Greece gave 666 depth. It made it a symbol of potential, but also of peril. Mystery schools flourished in the shadows of Greek society. The Eleusinian mysteries, the Orphic rites, the Pythagorean brotherhood, each preserved ancient knowledge, hidden from the uninitiated. To them, numbers were sacred spells. Initiates memorized complex sequences, performed ritual mathematics, and meditated on geometric forms. Six-sided symbols, star shapes with 666 angles, ritual chants timed to 6-beat cycles, sacred dances paced in multiples of 6. When you entered their sanctuaries, you weren't just walking into a ceremony, you were stepping into a living equation, one that pulsed with meaning far beyond what the senses could perceive. 666 appeared here too. Not shouted, not feared, but understood. It symbolized transformation, the moment when knowledge became gnosis, when learning became vision. These cults didn't teach fear of numbers. They taught reverence, but they also warned, when symmetry is broken, chaos follows. 666, once a divine frequency, could tip into disharmony. The Greeks didn't call it evil. They called it unbalanced, potential gone astray. Mathematically, 666 is no ordinary number. It's a triangle number, the sum of the first 36 numbers. That is, if you add 1 plus 2 plus 3 all the way up to 36, you get 666. To the Greeks, this was profound. Triangular numbers symbolized unity, perfect form. 36 itself was revered, 6 times 6. And within 36, the 12 zodiac signs, each paired with 3 decans, or minor star clusters, 12 times 3. Astrology, music, geometry, all converged in this number. The triangle of 36 held significance in rituals and diagrams, and its total, 666, was seen as a numeric harmony, a signpost on the journey through knowledge. Philosophers saw it as a numeric fingerprint of the macrocosm, a sign that the universe itself might be ordered, not by gods with lightning bolts, but by principles so elegant, so exact, they could be drawn with compass and straightedge. 666 was not a curse. It was an invitation to understand the world's hidden order. Still, not all viewed numbers with wonder. Some feared their power. As Greek influence spread, so did secret knowledge. Mystery schools became suspicious. Outsiders whispered that their rituals summoned more than knowledge, that they played with forces better left untouched. And as different beliefs clashed, the number 666 began to split. To one group it was sacred, to another sinister. The line between math and magic blurred. It didn't help that numerologists began to apply isopsephy, converting names into numbers. Gods, heroes, even enemies. And sometimes those names added up to 666. What once marked divine proportion could now brand a traitor, a tyrant, or a foreign god. Meaning twisted, logic turned inward. The Greeks had given 666 depth, but that depth became a well, one where light and darkness swirled together. As Greek thought spread into Rome, it carried this ambiguity. The number still shimmered with beauty, but now it cast a shadow. As Christianity emerged within the Hellenized world, Greek numerology didn't vanish, it evolved. The New Testament, written in Greek, encoded deeper meanings through letters and numbers. Early Christian thinkers, influenced by Pythagorean thought, saw numbers as symbols of divine truth, but they also feared the misuse of knowledge. In this climate of tension between revelation and heresy, 666 was ripe for reinterpretation. It was no longer just a number of harmony. It became a cipher, a mask, a code for an enemy of truth, the beast. But that shadow was not Greek in origin. It was layered over centuries of symbolism, a blend of Babylonian pride, Egyptian cycles, and Sumerian balance, filtered through Greek logic. The stage was now set. The beauty of numbers could no longer protect them from being feared. And the next chapter would turn 666 from an abstract idea into a political weapon. Greece gave 666 its soul. Rome would give it a name. As we leave Greece, the number follows us like a ghost in the architecture. Hidden in temples, chiseled in marble, echoing in sacred ratios. The Greeks never feared it. They respected it. They saw in it a glimpse of the divine. But the world was changing. Philosophy gave way to empire. Sacred geometry became state infrastructure. And in that shift, numbers lost their mystery and became tools. Tools for control, for censorship, for prophecy. 666 was no longer just a pattern. It was a secret to be used or destroyed. And as Rome rose from the ashes of Greek civilization, it carried 666 into a new era. An era of politics, persecution, and prophecy. In the next chapter, we'll watch how this number, once sung in the music of the spheres, will be sharpened into a dagger. In the hands of emperors and enemies alike, 666 will become more than math. It will become a threat.
Chapitre 5 Rome si donne si fait.
Rome did not rise on myth alone. It rose on law, on roads, and on numbers. But unlike the Greeks, who revered numbers as divine principles, Rome used them as tools of empire. Calendars became control. Taxes became tally marks of subjugation. And in this vast, humming machine of bureaucracy and conquest, numbers were not sacred, they were strategic. Yet even Rome, for all its pragmatic power, inherited the shadows of older worlds. It absorbed Babylon's astrology, Egypt's solar codes, and Greece's numerical philosophy. And hidden beneath its marble temples and military orders, a new code began to stir. One that would take the number 666 from sacred geometry into secret rebellion. A cipher wrapped in prophecy. A weapon cloaked in scripture. Rome would not invent the beast, but it would name it. And in doing so, the number crossed a line. No longer a cosmic echo, no longer a neutral pattern. In Rome, 666 became a loaded message, a curse with a target. Roman numerology had its roots in Greek isopsephy and Hebrew gematria, systems where letters had numeric values. Words, names, and titles could be transformed into numbers. This practice allowed for hidden meanings in texts, political satire, or esoteric teachings. Among Rome's elite, such techniques were common knowledge. Philosophers and poets used numbers to veil messages, sometimes to avoid censorship, sometimes to flatter emperors. But for early Christians living under Roman persecution, this method became survival. The Book of Revelation was written in a time of bloodshed. Rome had burned and Christians were blamed. Martyrs lined the streets. Faith became dangerous. So when the mysterious number 666 appeared in sacred texts, it wasn't an accident. It was code, a mirror turned toward the empire itself. And many who read it understood what it meant. Because when you spelled Nero Caesar in Hebrew letters and added their numeric values, you didn't just get a name. You got 666. Nero was no ordinary ruler. His reign was soaked in violence, decadence, and fear. He killed his own mother. He watched Rome burn. And he unleashed systematic persecution against Christians, using them as torches to light his gardens. To many early believers, he wasn't just an emperor. He was something darker, a living symbol of evil, the beast, but they couldn't say it aloud, so they encrypted it. 666 became a cipher, a warning cloaked in numerology. It wasn't mysticism, it was survival. A secret language spoken by the oppressed. To outsiders, it was cryptic prophecy. To insiders, it was clear as fire. Nero was the shadow behind the number, and as his legacy spread, so did the code. Even after his death, some believed he would return, that he had become immortal through sheer malevolence. The rumor of Nero Redivivus haunted the empire, and the number 666 began to mutate, from a hidden jab at a tyrant into a myth that could never die. The Book of Revelation was written in Greek, but its numerology relied on Hebrew. This duality gave the early Christian writers a cloak to operate under. When they wrote of the beast whose number was 666, they were embedding history into prophecy. They weren't just predicting a future villain. They were naming a present one, but in code. This technique, cryptic, defiant, dangerous, was a rebellion in ink, and the symbolism ran deep. The beast wasn't just Nero. It was the spirit of empire, the machinery of tyranny, the worship of power over people. 666, in this light, was a warning to future generations, that whenever rulers exalted themselves as gods, whenever systems crushed the soul in favor of order, the beast returned. It wasn't a single man, it was a pattern, and that pattern could be tracked through history, reappearing again and again, often in empires that had learned from Rome, borrowed from it, but never escaped its curse. Rome's obsession with control extended to calendars, taxes, and religion. Everything was measured, everything catalogued. And in this web of order, even faith was regulated. The imperial cult demanded worship of emperors as divine. Temples were built to Caesar, sacrifices made in the emperor's name. To refuse was treason. Christians, with their allegiance to an invisible God, became enemies of the state. But they fought back with ideas and with symbols. The fish, the cross, the number. 666 became one of the most potent of these hidden weapons. When read by the faithful, it warned of a beast in Rome's robes. When seen by censors, it passed as mystical nonsense. But its power grew, through whispers, through scrolls, through the blood of martyrs. Rome, in trying to erase rebellion, had unwittingly fed a myth that would outlive its emperors. The number wasn't destroyed. It was multiplied, etched into memory, until even future generations forgot who it first named. Ipsephi allowed Roman writers to encrypt even more. Hidden messages appeared in graffiti, scrolls, and coins. A clever citizen could insult the emperor with numbers, praise a lover with equations, or bury prophecies beneath surface text. This layering turned numbers into weapons, and 666 was the sharpest blade. Some early believers used variants, 616 or 665, depending on spelling or dialect, but the intent was always the same: to name the beast without saying his name. This tactic wasn't unique to Christians. Jewish mystics, Greek philosophers, and Roman critics had long used ciphers to navigate dangerous speech. But 666, thanks to Nero's infamy and the scriptures that followed, became the most infamous of all. Rome sharpened the myth. Every emperor who resembled Nero, cruel, arrogant, divine in name only, was compared to the beast. 666 became the signature of despotism. It wasn't a curse from heaven. It was a brand seared into the blueprint of tyranny. One Rome had helped design. As Christianity spread and Rome evolved, the beast remained. Some saw it in later emperors, others in rival religions or corrupt bishops. The number became flexible, elastic, could stretch to fit new enemies, and yet it retained its sting. It wasn't just a symbol of evil. It was a reminder that the abuse of power always follows patterns, and those patterns often wore the clothes of glory. The laurel crown, the marble statue, the triumphal arch Rome became legend, but legends carry warnings, and 666 haunted its memory like a ghost in stone. Later scholars and theologians would debate its meaning, argue over translations, and build theories around future antichrists. But in truth, the number had already done its work. It had crossed from hidden code to cultural curse, from math to myth. Rome didn't just give 666 a face. It gave it history, and that history bled forward into every generation that followed. In Rome, numbers weren't just for control. They were for legacy. The Colosseum was a monument to spectacle, measured in precise tiers and gates. The Roman calendar dictated feasts, fasts, and taxes. Even gladiator matchups followed rhythmic formulas to please the crowds. Yet, in the cracks of this polished empire, the number 666 spread like ink in water, crept into art, into carved graffiti, into catacombs where the persecuted gathered. The beast had no horns in these early depictions. It was often faceless, because it could be anyone, any ruler, any system. The number didn't describe a demon. It described a pattern. Rome had taught the world to fear the man who acts like a god. And in doing so, it had ensured that 666 would never be forgotten. Not because of superstition, but because of memory. The kind of memory empires cannot erase, no matter how many statues they build. Even long after Rome's collapse, its codes remained. Monks copied manuscripts with trembling hands. Scholars puzzled over hidden meanings, and 666 was always there, waiting. It lingered in the margins of maps and manuscripts. It pulsed in sermons and doomsday visions. The Roman beast had been named, but not slain. Every king who rose with iron in his fist was measured against that number. Every tyrant who crowned himself divine walked in Nero's footsteps. The cipher became a standard, and when the medieval world turned to prophecy, it looked back to Rome for symbols. 666 was chief among them, the mark of betrayal, the sign of the unholy throne. What had once been a code for survival became a prism through which all power was judged. Rome had baptized the number in blood and fire. Now the world would carry it forward, linking past, present, and apocalypse. And the beast, born of empire, would never truly die. In the next chapter, we will descend deeper into that darkness, into the burning fear of medieval minds, where scripture and superstition merged, where 666 was no longer a hidden message, but a brand burned into the soul of the world. The church would rise, heretics would fall, and the number would be twisted once again, this time into a weapon of the righteous. Inquisitions would thunder, books would burn. But beneath the flames, secret societies would whisper that the number still held older truths, that before it was a curse, it was a pattern, a code, a key, and some would dare to remember. Chapter 6: Medieval Shadows and Secret Orders. When Rome collapsed, its empire did not disappear. It fractured into myth and memory. Across the ruins of ancient roads and broken aqueducts, a new force emerged. The church. It did not rise on chariots or armies, but on parchment, fire, and fear. As Europe stumbled into the Middle Ages, uncertainty ruled.
Plague, famine, endless war.
And when people looked for answers, they looked to prophecy. The number 666, once a hidden code aimed at emperors, became something else entirely. A symbol not of rebellion, but of terror. The beast was no longer Nero, it was Satan himself. And as the church grew in power, it seized the number and rebranded it. In sermons, in paintings, in illuminated texts, 666 was transformed into the devil's signature. The faithful trembled at its sight. But beneath this new surface, older meanings still lingered. In monasteries, cloisters, and secret gatherings, some remembered what 666 had once been. Pattern, a mystery, a secret worth protecting. The church wielded fear like a sword. It needed symbols that could terrify, symbols that could define enemies and fortify obedience. 666 became the most powerful among them. No longer was it discussed in mathematical terms or mystical ratios. It was preached as a direct mark of evil. The beast was the Antichrist, and his number was his brand. This narrative surged through medieval Europe like wildfire. It was etched in cathedral stone, painted into Judgment Day frescoes, and whispered during Mass. To question it was to question the church itself. But not everyone believed the story being told. Hidden beneath this veil of fire and brimstone were thinkers who saw more than damnation. Alchemists, hermetic philosophers, Templars, mystics. These were the inheritors of secret traditions that stretched back to Babylon, to Egypt, to Sumer. To them, 666 was not just a number of fear, it was a key. A cipher holding truths the church would rather burn than acknowledge. Inquisitions swept across Europe like storms. Heretics were hunted, books destroyed, entire villages silenced. And still the number persisted. The church feared it even as it taught it, because deep down, it knew that power lay hidden beneath the symbols it had demonized. Among the condemned were mathematicians who studied forbidden ratios, monks who preserved ancient scrolls, alchemists who drew strange diagrams of stars, circles, and six-pointed seals. To the untrained eye, they were sorcerers, but in truth, they were custodians of memory. They knew that 666 appeared not just in scripture, but in geometry, in music, in the heavens. They knew it was a number of balance, of symmetry and cycle, so they passed their knowledge in coded manuscripts, inked in disappearing dyes or wrapped inside harmless psalms. The beast, they taught, was not the number, but the ignorance surrounding it. And as flames consumed libraries and screams echoed through stone chambers, a few brave minds held the ancient pattern close to their hearts. Knights of secret orders carried more than swords. Some bore relics of forgotten science. The Knights Templar, though publicly warriors of Christ, were whispered to be guardians of older wisdom. Their vaults were rumored to contain scrolls from Alexandria, diagrams from Solomon's temple, even star maps from Babylon. Among their sacred numbers was 666, kept not as a curse, but as a signpost. To outsiders, this was heresy. To insiders, it was history. They believed in dual truths, one public, one hidden. When the Templars were accused of worshipping idols and consorting with demons, many of their secrets were lost. But not all. Some members fled into the shadows, joining other esoteric brotherhoods, the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians. These groups adopted the number in their sacred architecture and symbolic codes. To them, it wasn't satanic. It was cosmic, an echo of something older than the church, a numerical language whispered across time. One that warned not of evil, but of imbalance, of power misused. Manuscripts from this era, when deciphered, reveal astonishing patterns. Margins filled with diagrams, letters that hide equations, psalms that count to 666 across verses. The medieval world was a paradox, deeply superstitious, yet burning with quiet intelligence. In the monasteries, scribes were often mathematicians. Their illuminations weren't just decorative, they were encoded. Golden spirals, repeating sixes, hexagrams blended with crosses. In some, the number 666 appears subtly, marked not as a warning but as a harmonic signature. These scribes weren't defying the church outright. They were hiding in plain sight, using sacred texts to preserve older truths, because they knew that 666 wasn't the devil. It was the lens through which to view the devil's pattern: tyranny, corruption, false prophecy. The number revealed when systems turned on the people they claimed to protect. When religion became empire, it was not a curse from outside, it was a mirror from within. And in the shadows, that mirror was polished with care. Alchemy became the last refuge of ancient numerology. In an age where science was forbidden and philosophy bound by dogma, alchemy preserved complexity. Not just the transformation of lead into gold, but the transformation of man into something higher. 666 was part of this great work. In alchemical texts, it appeared as a triple spiral, as three interlocked sixes, as the sum of subtle ratios. The philosopher's stone was not just a substance, it was a symbol, a state of harmony between body, mind, and soul. and some alchemists believed 666 marked that harmony hidden in the structure of nature itself. They feared not the number, but those who misused it. For in the wrong hands, balance becomes dominance. Knowledge becomes control. These thinkers were hunted. Many died in silence, but their manuscripts survived, buried beneath floorboards, hidden inside prayer books, encrypted in illustrations of angels and beasts. Alchemy kept the secret alive. That 666 was never meant to frighten. It was meant to enlighten. As the Crusades raged and kingdoms fell, secret orders moved knowledge across borders. East met west. Arabic numerals replaced Roman ones, and with them came translations of lost Greek, Egyptian, and Babylonian texts.
Astrological charts, mathematical treatises, esoteric doctrines.
In these newly recovered works, 666 returned in unexpected places, as the sum of planetary cycles, as the key to musical harmonics, as the number of solar years in certain prophetic calculations. For Islamic scholars, numbers held beauty and logic. The number 6 represented creation, God's crafting of the universe in 6 days. When extended across dimensions, 666 became a map of motion, time, and divine order. Some Christian mystics embraced these ideas, blending them with their own hidden traditions. But publicly, the Church still ruled by fear. 666 remained a warning etched into cathedral stone. Few dared speak of its other meanings aloud. But the truth traveled in whispers, across caravans between illuminated pages, kept alive by those who believed in balance. In Gothic architecture, cathedrals rose like stone prayers. Spires pierced the sky, stained glass poured in cosmic light, and everywhere geometry ruled. The same proportions that shaped Greek temples now guided Christian basilicas. The golden ratio, sacred triangles, circular labyrinths of 36 turns. Some designs echoed the very mathematics that once birthed the number 666. Secret societies claimed these cathedrals were coded books, open to the eyes, hidden to the mind. Beneath the eyes of saints and gargoyles, builders inscribed messages in numbers. Some point to 66 steps in cloisters. Others count 6 hexagonal rosettes carved into ceilings. These weren't coincidences. They were symbols meant for those who could see. The architecture of the medieval world was not as ignorant as the fire and brimstone sermons made it seem. Beneath the fear lay order. Beneath the superstition, symmetry. And beneath the demonization of 666 lay its original face. Still present, still powerful. Waiting for the world to remember. Which hunts followed like storms in the later Middle Ages. Women, herbalists, midwives, healers, all accused of consorting with the beast. The number 666 was read into dreams, into herbs, into coincidences. Anything unfamiliar became suspect, and the Church, desperate to maintain control as the Renaissance dawned, fanned the flames. The beast was not just Satan, it was disobedience, curiosity, dissent. Entire regions lived in terror of the number. And yet, despite the terror, knowledge survived, carried by wandering philosophers, by Jewish scholars preserving Kabbalistic traditions, by artists painting clues into their work. 666 became an underground thread, connecting hidden schools of thought. Not a cult, not a conspiracy, but a current of resistance against simplification, against fear. And for every bonfire that consumed a book, a dozen more were written in code. Knowledge never truly dies. It just changes form. And as the darkness of the medieval world reached its peak, a new light prepared to rise, one that would remember. As the medieval world faded, the Renaissance arrived like a breath of fire. Artists, scientists, and thinkers dusted off ancient manuscripts and began to read again. The number 666 began to appear in new places, drawn into diagrams of planetary motion, embedded in architectural plans, painted into celestial charts. It no longer belonged solely to the church or to fear. It belonged to those who dared to question, to rediscover, and yet the shadow remained. The myth of the beast still echoed in pulpits and books of prophecy. It had grown too powerful to vanish completely, but the true nature of 666 began to emerge once more. A number of cycles, of cosmic proportions, of balance. In the next chapter, we will trace how this ancient symbol re-enters the modern world. In technology, in science, in finance. 666 did not die in the flames of the Middle Ages. It survived, reborn again and again, not as a monster, but as a mirror. Chapter 7. The real meaning of 666. For thousands of years, the number 666 traveled through temples, scrolls, cathedrals, and crypts. It was a sacred pattern, a cosmic riddle, a cipher of rebellion, and a warning cry. But today, most know it only as the number of the beast, a symbol of evil. Few realize how much has been forgotten, how deeply this number is woven into the systems that run our world. This chapter brings every thread together. Because 666 never disappeared. It evolved. It slipped into algorithms, circuitry, calendars, and code. It is not just in books or prophecy. It is in the math that governs stock exchanges, in the architecture of digital control, in the software that decides what we see, what we buy, and even what we believe. In this final chapter, we reveal what 666 truly is. Not just a myth, not just a mark, but a reflection, a window into how numbers shape reality, and how one ancient number still haunts our modern mind. Take a moment to look around. Nearly every part of your life is measured, tracked, and regulated by numbers. The second, the hour, the day, they are fragments of cycles rooted in base 60 systems. Just like the sexagesimal math of ancient Sumer, modern timekeeping revolves around 60 seconds and 60 minutes. This isn't coincidence, it's legacy. And from those ancient roots, 666 emerges again. Multiply 6 by 60 by 60, and the result is 21,600, a number that once described the precession of the Earth and still echoes in global navigation systems. Our GPS satellites run on time grids tied to those same astronomical cycles. We don't think about it, but every journey we take is calculated through mathematical descendants of 666. It doesn't stop at time. Digital systems, currencies, and computation all rely on patterns of repetition. Sixes appear not by superstition, but by design. Not because they are evil, but because they are efficient. Order disguised as coincidence. The financial world offers another mirror. Barcodes, the black and white fingerprints of modern commerce, encode information using guard bars that resemble the number 6. 3 bars, 3 sixes, not by accident. Some theories overreach, but the core truth remains. Commerce runs on numbers, and 666 is among them. Look deeper into trading algorithms and you'll find numeric models that loop in trios, ratios, and time cycles that mirror ancient systems. High-frequency trading operates on split-second calculations that follow mathematical patterns traced back to Greek geometry and Babylonian time. Even cryptocurrencies, the newest form of currency, are built on blockchains powered by hashing functions, mathematical locks and keys that echo the same symmetries once carved into temple walls. It's not that modern finance is secretly demonic. It's that ancient patterns never died. They were digitized, rebranded, hidden in plain sight. We did not invent 666 as a modern curse. We inherited it as an ancient tool, powerful, misunderstood, and still shaping the flow of wealth. Artificial intelligence introduces the newest dimension of this old number. Deep learning systems operate using weight matrices and activation functions, layered mathematical structures that echo harmonic sequences, many involving repetition, balance, and binary interpretations of data. As machines learn to mimic human behavior, they rely on patterns of prediction. And prediction, in turn, depends on cycles, just as 666 once symbolized in ancient astronomy. In some neural nets, the number 6 occurs frequently in the architecture of hidden layers. Not deliberately, but because it is efficient in balancing depth and breadth in computation. And still, some engineers take pause when certain model IDs or token outputs generate the repeating sixes. Not because they fear Satan, but because they understand symbols can shape perception. In a world guided by invisible logic, 666 still holds power. Not magical, not mystical, but psychological. We may not pray to numbers anymore, but we still react to them. And deep down, we still listen when they whisper. We've seen how 666 has survived through calendars, religions, architecture, and economics. But now we must explore its duality. Why does this number inspire awe in some and terror in others? Why does it exist as both sacred and profane? The answer lies in its symmetry. 3 sixes, a triad. In many ancient cultures, 3 is the number of completion. Combine it with 6, the number of harmony and motion, and you get a numerical form of cyclical perfection. The ancients saw this as divine order. But cycles can also be cages. What repeats can also trap. And in a world of repetition, of screens, routines, and endless loops, 666 becomes a reflection of modern life. Its fear stems from that recognition, not that it represents a demon, but that it reveals our systems too well. We fear 666 not because it lies, but because it tells the truth. We are ruled by invisible cycles, and we chose them. Think back to the earliest whispers of this number. The Sumerians used it as part of a larger pattern that shaped how they saw the stars and seasons. Egyptians wove it into rituals of solar balance. Babylonians saw it as a mark of cosmic perfection, until human pride gave it a darker twist. The Greeks encoded it in geometry. The Romans turned it into a political cipher. The Church demonized it. And yet, through all these transformations, one thing stayed constant. 666 remained a mirror of power. When power served life, it was holy. When it served control, it became a curse. But the number itself never changed. Only its interpretation did. That is the real meaning. 666 has always shown us what we believe about power. divine, destructive, or deceptive depends on who wields it. And today, that question matters more than ever. Because for the first time, humanity has built systems capable of global control. And they run on numbers. In modern society, identity is increasingly numerical. National IDs, bank accounts, social credit, surveillance logs. Your existence can be boiled down to a string of digits stored on servers you've never seen. These numbers decide if you can fly, borrow money, or enter a building. They are invisible yet absolute. And in this age of coded lives, the idea of a number marking people feels less like prophecy and more like policy. When the book of Revelation warned of a mark without which none could buy or sell, it wasn't describing fantasy. It was foreseeing bureaucracy. 666 is not some ancient ghost. It is the modern barcode, the login credential, the algorithmic gatekeeper. It does not need horns or hooves. It just needs access. And so, the old warnings return with new clarity, not to fear the number, but to question the system. Who writes the code? Who controls the math? The answer determines whether 666 remains a mirror or becomes a muzzle. But 666 is not destiny. It is not fate carved into stone. It is a symbol, and symbols can be rewritten. Some see it as a warning. Others see it as a guide. In Kabbalah, 6 represents beauty, balance, and heart. Tripled, it becomes powerful. In Eastern traditions, cycles of 6 describe harmony in movement and thought. In digital coding, 6-digit strings protect and connect us. The fear around 666 came not from the number itself, but from those who sought to control its meaning. When it was linked to beasts and antichrists, it was done so to create obedience. But when examined through ancient and modern lenses, a different truth emerges. The number reveals patterns, balance, and symmetry. It reflects power, yes, but also potential. In the hands of tyrants, it becomes a lock. In the hands of dreamers, it becomes a key. Our task is not to run from 666, but to understand it. Because to fear what we do not understand is the first step toward losing control. The legacy of 666 is written in human choices. Not in superstition, but in structure. Not in prophecy, but in pattern. It began as math, evolved into myth, and now lives as metaphor. The survival proves its adaptability. Empires have risen and fallen under its shadow. Faiths have twisted it into prophecy. Kings have used it to rule. Rebels have used it to resist. And yet, here it remains, alive in the systems that tell us what time it is, where we are, what we owe, and what we are allowed to do. If you listen closely, you can hear its rhythm in the hum of machines, in the cadence of schedules, in the silence of data. 666 is not coming. It is already here, but it does not command. It reflects. It shows us who we are when no one is watching. That is the true secret. Not that 666 has power, but that we gave it. So what now? Now that you've followed the trail through temples and tombs, codes and cathedrals, what should you take away? Understand this. 666 was never a curse cast upon humanity. It was a pattern we found. A structure we built upon, a tool we misunderstood. The power was never in the number. It was in the belief, and belief, when magnified, shapes civilizations. If we believe 666 is evil, we make systems that punish. If we believe it is divine, we make systems that elevate. But if we see it for what it truly is, a mirror, we gain something more. Awareness, the ability to choose, to see the code and not be controlled by it, to reshape the stories that shaped us. That is the final meaning. 666 is not a prophecy of doom. It is a question, one every era must answer in its own way. Who controls the pattern, and who is brave enough to rewrite it? You have journeyed across 6,000 years, from clay tablets to circuit boards, from Sumerian math to artificial intelligence. And in all that time, one number has never disappeared. It has simply changed shape, adapted, echoed. The real meaning of 666 is not hidden in prophecy or cloaked in smoke. It is this. It is a mirror. It shows us the structure of power, the cycles we live by, the symbols we fear, and in doing so, it offers a choice. Will we let the past dictate our future, or will we learn from what was forgotten? 666 is not an answer. It is a reflection, a silent question posed to each generation. And now it is posed to us. Will we fear the pattern, or will we understand it, claim it, and choose how it shapes our world? Because the real secret is this: 666 does not define us. We define it.